100 million years ago, a humble group of sea snails crept along the ocean floor and decided they wanted to be different. They decided to strive for something new. They decided to lose their shells. And then some crazy things happened. These are the nudibranchs, soft-bodied marine gastropod mollusks known for their bizarre shapes and extraordinary colors. And personally, I think they're the most beautiful creatures on the planet. Of course, those early sea snails didn't decide to lose their shells, but that pivotal moment in mollusk history 100 million years ago led to this explosion in evolution. And it really was an explosion. Over 3,000 species of nudibranchs are known to exist, but scientists estimate that thousands more may still be undiscovered. They live everywhere, from the poles to the tropics, in both shallow and deep water. And they aren't just colorful, they are extremely weird. Their frilly appendages aren't just for decoration, they're used for breathing, for digesting, and for defense. And they can be pretty dangerous as a jellyfish sting. Not because it's similar to a jellyfish sting, but because it literally is a jellyfish sting. Some nudibranchs eat creatures like jellyfish or anemones, then harvest the stinging cells and store them in their own bodies to use as their own defense. Nudibranchs are also hermaphrodites, meaning that they all have all of the mating parts, giving them perfect symmetry in their mating roles. Each pair is like a yin and a yang, or a 6 and an upside down 6. These are some of the anatomy concepts that drove me to make this video. But the real reason is because I look at photo after photo of these creatures and almost can't believe that they are real. In the massive expanse of the universe, in the endless miles of the dark ocean, these otherworldly slugs slime around, looking amazing without even knowing it. So how exactly did ditching their shells lead to all of this variety? How do they co-opt the defenses of their prey? And how and why did sea slugs become the most dazzling animal in the ocean? Nudibranchs are soft-bodied sea slugs in the gastropod family, most of which are jaw-droppingly stunning. There's Chromodorus woolani with its electric blue hues, or Nimbrotha kubariana, also known as the variable neon slug. Or there's Philodesmium longicerum, which resembles soft coral. Or there's this one, Flabellina iodinea, nicknamed the Spanish shawl, that looks like a vibrant flame. And this one particularly looks fake, Glaucus atlanticus, commonly known as the blue dragon, which floats on the ocean's surface. It's hard to even believe that creatures this beautiful just exist. There are actually a lot of different types of sea slugs and snails, many of which are absolutely amazing, like the massive sea hares, the sea angels, ethereal free swimmers, and sacoglossans, like the leaf slug, aka the sea sheep. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to focus mainly on the nudibranchs, the carnivorous sea slugs defined by their exposed gills and club-shaped rhinophores. They can be incredibly diverse, both in color and in size. Some adults can be just 4 millimeters long, others can be up to 600 millimeters, like the Spanish dancer. And they're generally divided into two main types based on their body structure and gill placement. Dorid nudibranchs have mostly smooth, often very colorful mantles, and the gills form a feathery circle on the dorsal surface. And aeolid nudibranchs, the gills are a bit different. They are within the serrata, the finger-like extensions covering the mantle. Both types have rhinophores, which are paired, club-like structures that detect chemical signals in the water. They can retract into sheaths for protection. And all nudibranchs also have very simple eyes located at the base of the rhinophores. These can detect light and dark, but not detailed images. It's a sad irony that they can't even see how colorful they are. And on the right side of their body is the reproductive opening. Unlike many animals which are either male or female, nudibranchs and other sea slugs are hermaphrodites, possessing both male and female reproductive parts. What's the deal with that?
The advantage of that is that any two individuals that come in contact with each other can reproduce.
This is Dr. Terry Gosliner, lead researcher at the Slug Lab at the California Academy of Sciences.
It's like if you had a drawer full of socks that are all one color, any two of them are going to make a pair. That's the advantage of hermaphroditism.
So to mate, nudibranchs typically line up with their right sides touching, because their genital openings are on the right side of their body. Then they insert a penis-like structure into each other, often simultaneously. It sort of looks like a handshake. This is called reciprocal copulation, and both partners leave pregnant. I am envious of the equitable nature of this, and if it increases the chance of reproduction, why doesn't every animal do this?
The disadvantage, like everything in evolutionary existence, they're trade-offs. And so the downside is that it requires more energy to produce both male and female gametes and to have all of the complex reproductive anatomy that you need to have.
But for the slow-moving nudibranchs in a vast ocean, it's a perfect solution to increase the success of reproduction. After mating happens, both partners will lay their own set of beautiful eggs, often coiled like underwater lace. Some species will lay just 1 or 2 eggs, others will lay up to 25 million. And when the babies hatch, they look a bit different than the adult versions.
The nudibranchs, when they're a larval stage and swimming around in the plankton, have a perfectly coiled shell, just like any little snail. And then once they settle to the bottom, they literally crawl out of their shell and become completely shellless.
And it's not just the larval nudibranchs that have a shell, their ancestors had one too. If shells are what protect them, why would they evolve to lose it?
The answer is actually pretty straightforward. It costs a lot of energy to build a shell, to secrete the calcium carbonate and build up a shell. And if you think of things that have a really strong, well-developed shell, like a conch shell, that requires so much energetically, but their survival really depends on it because in the absence of having a shell, they're completely edible. You need the shell as a form of protection. And the early ancestors of nudibranchs, they started developing chemical defense mechanisms. And once they were protected from predation chemically, then there's no longer any advantage evolutionarily to having a shell and having to expend that much of their metabolic energy producing the shell.
So just like the hermaphroditism, it comes down to energy. In that case, it's energetically worth it for them to have both male and female parts. In this case, it's not energetically worth it to have a shell.
And the other thing is, if you were crawling around with a big structure on your back, it impedes your locomotion, it requires more energy to move about, it decreases your mobility and flexibility. And so once they had this chemical defense mechanism, they have a lot more ability to explore different ecological niches.
Most nudibranchs are slow but nimble crawlers, but a few species have even evolved to swim freely through the water, like the hooded nudibranch, which looks like a ghost and apparently smells like watermelon? Or the Spanish dancer, which can undulate like this to relocate when disturbed. Chemical defenses allowed nudibranchs to lose their shell and thus to be able to move like this. But isn't growing chemical defenses also energetically expensive? Venoms and poisons are sort of known to be amongst the most energetically expensive biological adaptations. They're typically large, complex molecules like alkaloids, peptides, or terpenoids that require complex biosynthesis. So some nudibranchs have a better, or at least cheaper plan than to make such complex molecules. They steal them.
The stealing of defense mechanisms is what you find in the aeolid nudibranchs, which are the ones that have these bushy finger-like appendages sticking out of their bodies. And they're able to ingest the stinging cells of the cnidarian prey that they feed on, things like jellyfish and sea anemones that have some pretty potent stinging cells.
And this is an operation that is not without danger.
They're really playing with fire as they're doing it because there is a potential real risk to feeding on dangerous prey. It's like a mongoose trying to attack a cobra. There's inherent risk in all of that.
Sometimes this looks like the nudibranch goes in for a quick and violent strike, but really it's the anemone retracting in response, sucking the head of the nudibranch into its tube. It's a squishy battle royale. But assuming the nudibranch survives the encounter and gets a meal, most of the stinging cells it consumes are simply digested. But amazingly, the less mature stinging cells are preserved and are transported through their digestive system up to the tips of their serrata.
And at the tip, there's a very specialized sac where the stinging cells are stored. And in a way that we do not yet understand, they are able to provide an environment where those organelles can still undergo maturation, and then the nudibranchs can discharge those nematocysts and fire them under their own control for their own defense. It's pretty remarkable.
The blue sea dragon is probably the most dangerous nudibranch we know of because of the particular target of its thievery. It steals the nematocysts of the Portuguese man-o'-war, a hydrozoan with a devastating sting. Sea slugs of many varieties use thievery to their advantage. While not a nudibranch, the sea sheep is another example. It's a sacoglossan that steals functional chloroplasts from its food. Since it's not a nudibranch and outside the scope of this video, I've made another whole video about these solar-powered sea slugs, which you can watch now on Nebula. In the episode, I explore how these solar-powered slugs hijack chloroplasts from algae and use sunlight to survive, and also how this has led to certain species intentionally cutting their own heads off and somehow regrowing an entirely new body over and over again. It's a surprising story that you can go watch now. So in general, some sea slugs start to work like a plant and others start to work like a jellyfish. But a few nudibranch species aren't thieves at all. The lion's mane nudibranch, a type of hooded nudibranch, can synthesize its own defensive compounds, like unpalatable terpenoids. Others, like the yellow-edged Gosliner, make a particularly potent terpenoid called luteolin. All of these chemical defenses are incredible by themselves, but luckily for us, it led to something else. An absolute explosion of vibrant colors. Where does color come into all of this?
Basically, what they're doing is exhibiting bright colors and in specific patterns that alert predators to the fact that they're distasteful.
This is called aposematism. You might be familiar with it from other animals like poison dart frogs. And amazingly, it nearly perfectly protects the nudibranchs.
And I've done experiments in the field, and one of the things you can do is do what I call the barfing fish experiment. And you take a nudibranch and you throw it up into the water column, and a bunch of fish will come over, look at the nudibranch, and if they've encountered that nudibranch before, they usually just leave them alone. Some naive fish probably haven't encountered them, and one hardy soul will immediately take it into its mouth and usually immediately spit it out and leave the nudibranch unharmed. And you watch the fish and its behavior becomes really sort of altered. It starts flaring its gills, and you can tell that it's very unhappy. What we've done in cases like that is that we've studied fish in captivity and had the same individuals, and after they've had an encounter with a nudibranch, we'll offer them a nudibranch again, and they will usually ignore it. And if you offer them a little piece of squid or something like that, they'll immediately ingest it. So we know they're hungry. They're basically learning to avoid those nudibranchs, and they will do that for the 2 weeks that we've tested them, and probably longer.
Does it matter what the color patterns are?
Well, one of the things that you find is that you have a lot of mimicry where different species that are not each other's closest relatives in the same geographical area will have the same color pattern. And so the advantage of that is that a potential predator, something like a fish, will only have to learn a set number of color patterns and recognize that those are distasteful organisms. And we know that fish have good color vision, so they can distinguish different colors, but also the contrasting nature of the patterns is really important.
And the way Dr. Gosliner and his team know this has to do with the deep sea. Certain species of nudibranchs live in the ocean twilight zone, from 200 meters up to 1,000 meters deep. Here, a small amount of light penetrates, but all of the color has been stripped.
It becomes a black and white world. And what you find is that a lot of the nudibranchs that you find in the mesophotic will have black and white contrasting color patterns, so with alternating lines and things like that of really bold black and white color patterns.
Other nudibranchs went in the other direction, and rather than evolve neon colors, they evolved to look just like the prey that they're feeding on. This is the case for Phylodesmium sea slugs. They employ a form of camouflage where their serrata mimic the tentacles of the soft coral that they feed on. This mimicry allows them to blend into their environment and evade predators. There are an unbelievable amount of color patterns in the world of nudibranchs, and an unbelievable amount of species, all of which have this almost magical feeling to them. There are over 3,000 named species of nudibranch. But based on recent genetic sequencing, Dr. Gosliner thinks that there could be many, many more. Maybe like 10,000, maybe 15,000, maybe even more than that.
Earlier this spring, I did a workshop in the Philippines with a bunch of citizen scientists who were underwater photographers, just documenting as many different species as we could, and we actually encountered at least 17 species that were brand new in the same reefs I'd been diving for 30 years. There's still diversity out there to be discovered on almost every dive.
Why are there so many species, and why are there so many colors?
So there are a lot of species because nudibranchs have been incredibly diverse in terms of their specialization on different prey. It's also a result of the geological history and how there have been changes in current patterns as islands emerge and erode. Also, the changes of sea level during various ice ages and interglacial periods. All of those have restricted the distribution of nudibranchs that have allowed them to basically diversify and have geographical separation between areas that allow that genetic differentiation between similar species. And then the second question really about why are there so many color patterns, I don't think we really have any clue, to be perfectly honest.
And as Dr. Gosliner likes to say, they aren't just a pretty face. I am completely mesmerized by their beauty, but there are more reasons to study them than just that.
Nudibranchs are really good model organisms to understand how healthy ecosystems function. There are a lot of nudibranchs. That means that there's lots of different kinds of prey, which is reflective of the health and diversity of that ecosystem.
Nudibranchs are also of particular significance for pharmaceutical products, since certain species make their own potent biologically active toxins or steal the toxin from their prey and make it even more powerful. A related sea hare has been found to have compounds that inhibit HIV replication.
And so they're really important in terms of human health and well-being, as well as just being some of the most interesting and gorgeous creatures on the planet.
When I look at them, I am reminded of the vastness of time, how life has shaped itself over millions of years through trial and error. There's a sort of spiritual satisfaction in witnessing something so beautiful and that works so well in its environment. Something that, like everything else on this planet, has been shaped by a battle for survival. But beyond the wild colors and soft squishiness, nudibranchs also remind us of something deeper. Something strange about biology itself. How much we assume we understand when we really don't. Now imagine if a single biology paper, just 17 pages long, shook the entire scientific community, led to a full-blown congressional investigation, and became known as the Scientific Watergate. That's the story at the heart of 17 Pages, a feature-length documentary that dives into one of the most shocking controversies in modern science. It's got ethics battles, media frenzy, and real congressional testimony. But more than that, 17 Pages asks the question, what happens when science, politics, and human bias collide? And what does truth even mean when public perception takes over? This is one of those documentaries that leaves you thinking differently, about evidence, about trust, about how fragile the truth can be once it leaves the lab. and it's only on Nebula. 17 Pages is a Nebula original, and it's just one of many smart, exclusive shows on the platform with no ads, no algorithm nonsense, just deep dive storytelling by people who really care about big ideas. There are so many Nebula originals like this, like my Nebula original series, Becoming Human, and Archaeology Quest, 2 shows about our ancient past, one serious, one silly. Nebula is also where, right now, you can go watch an entire Real Science bonus episode about sacoglossans, like the incredible leaf sheep, or the lettuce slug, or this one that looks like an ethereal leafy dream. They may be small, but these slugs are rewriting the rules of life as we know it because of their extraordinary superpower, their ability to photosynthesize. In the episode, I explore how these solar-powered slugs hijack chloroplasts from their algal food and use sunlight to survive, and also how this has led to certain species intentionally cutting their own heads off. It's a surprising story that you can go watch now only on Nebula. You can also watch the extended interview with Dr. Terry Gosliner on Nebula now. And right now, we're offering gift cards to Nebula for you to give to family members. This is a great last-minute gift idea. It's a totally digital, instant gift that will give your friends and family so much original content without having to worry about yet another subscription. 1 year subscription is only $36. Or to give your friend or family member access to everything Nebula will ever have to offer, you can gift a lifetime subscription for $300. So go to nebula.tv/realscience or click the link in the description to get 40% off a yearly subscription for the incredibly low price of $3 per month.